Welcome, folks, to the Scholar's Nook, where you receive mindful tips for the budding scholar. My name is Dr. Nick Wolf.
And I'm Dr. Steven Lennerberger.
We are glad you're here. Hello, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Nick?
No, I'm on top of the world.
Good.
Why don't you tell us what we're talking about today?
Well, great. I'm excited about this topic, Nick. It's something that that's near and dear to me as an experience I've had, and I've found a lot of people have an experience with it. So today we're going to dive into um, this topic, which is incredibly common, but often kept in the shadows. And the topic is imposter syndrome. If you've ever felt like you don't belong in your academic or professional space, that your successes are just luck, or that you're one step away from being found out, you're not alone. Um, this silent struggle impacts countless individuals in higher education, including students, faculty, and administrators alike. But there's a kicker here. Imposter syndrome isn't just an emotional hurdle, it can directly impact your performance, contribute to burnout, and make the challenges of higher education or the doctoral journey feel even more overwhelming. So, today I thought in this episode we could talk about it. And in doing so, we'll break it down into a couple of sections. First, we're going to talk about what imposter syndrome is and why it's so pervasive in higher education and again, especially in graduate education, how it affects performance, well-being, and professional growth. And then most importantly, I'd like to offer some strategies to recognize it, address it, and prevent it from holding you back. And so, whether you're a student questioning if you deserve a spot in the classroom, or a professor feeling the weight of expectations, or a staff member juggling competing responsibilities, I think this conversation is for you. So grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and let's talk about how to unmask imposter syndrome, reclaim your confidence, and thrive on your academic journey. And I'm going to start by relating, and I should disclose, I suffer from imposter syndrome. It's been brewing on the surface or under the surface for a lot of years, but it's come into full force in the last few years. But the first experience I had with it was a dream that I had one night, and it was probably a year after I finished my PhD at University of Nebraska, and I was in bed, of course, and deep asleep, and I had this dream where I got a call from the registrar's office at University of Nebraska, and they said, Stephen, we've gone through your records, and it appears that we made a huge error. We know you took 9 hours of statistics already, and side note here, I'm not good at statistics. That was the hardest classes I've ever taken. But in this dream, they said I actually needed 9 more credits of statistics. And therefore, they were sorry to inform me that they were going to revoke my PhD, and I was going to have to take those classes in order to re-earn the PhD. Well, I woke up in a cold sweat. I could still literally, my heart's racing just telling that story. It was a true nightmare. But then, luckily, right, when I started to calm down and realize it was just a bad dream, I remember my doctoral dissertation advisor saying, "Hey, when you finish this up, I want to warn you about imposter syndrome." And it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And he said, a lot of students experience this where, they'll have a dream that their degree's been revoked, or there's been a mistake, exactly the dream that I had. And he said, but more importantly, what's going to happen is you're going to feel like you're a fraud. You're going to feel like you don't belong, and that you can't believe that you're where you are for a lot of different reasons. Maybe because of your background, lack of confidence, or whatever, but you feel like a fraud. And it tends to be really pervasive in competitive, high achieving environments. We're often surrounded by peers with impressive credentials, which we all are in this world. We go to conferences, we hear these great masters speak, and so we kind of work in a field and our students in an area that there's a lot of comparison between ourselves and those with higher status. And so, after a while, if we're not careful, we can become very insecure and start worrying that we really are a fraud. I have one of my best friends is a extremely accomplished medical doctor. And I asked him one time, I said, have you ever had this problem? And he thought it was so weird I brought it up because he said the week before I asked him, he'd had an experience with it where he was dealing with a very difficult situation, had to deliver some, very technical information to some colleagues and a patient. And then the patient started asking questions, and he said he kind of blanked almost and thought, why are these people asking me this stuff? How can it be that I'm the one answering these questions? And he said he had this overwhelming urge to look over his shoulder at somebody else to answer the questions. Now, this is a guy top of his field, right? So that made me feel better that I wasn't going crazy, and that with in addition to um, my doctoral advisor warning me about it, I felt like, okay, I know what it is, but little did I know how it would manifest itself later, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But I'm going to take a break and ask if you have any thoughts yet on this topic.
I certainly do.
Let's hear them.
You're talking about comparisons, and that's such a huge part of imposter syndrome. And you recall that a lot of times when I think about things that resonate with me, a lot of times I pull out movies.
Yeah,
Have you ever seen The Paper Chase?
I have. I love that movie
Okay,
and program. Yeah,
for it was a movie as well as a TV show, but
yeah,
what this is about the movie. For those of you who have not seen it, it's a examination of the experience of Harvard Law School, and this was, I want to say it was 1973, somewhere in that area when this
yeah,
came out, um, and the 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 protagonist of the movie, Mr. Hart, starts to gets to Harvard Law School, and basically the person who he idolizes, because this person loves the law, and the person he idolizes is a man named Professor Kingsfield. Now, in this man's mind, he's made this person up is a marble ideal of the best person here, and there's a lot of interplay between him, the professor, and the love interest. And let you watch that here. But one of the coolest things was, I guess he found out that in the secret stacks at the university, that all of the initial notes from his original from Professor Kingsfield's path through Harvard Law School are kept in storage there. So he and a colleague break into the stacks this one evening and actually pulls things out. He says, "I'm going to learn so much interesting insights into this huge legal mind." He pulls it out and he says, "Oh, okay. So it's smart, it's good, but it's not earth breaking. It's just he realized that Professor Kingsfield is just a man, and he humanizes him the image of him in his head. And when that happens, all of a sudden he becomes something to aspire to. It's the distance, the aspiration becomes possible.
mm-hmm.
And that is a huge thing I think about imposter syndrome, is that who we compare ourselves to is is often unfair, because when you're not comparing ourselves, it's not an equal or a good comparison. You
Mm-hmm.
should never compare yourself just starting out
Mm-hmm.
with the person at the end of their journey.
Right.
I'll give you an example. We are a big board game family in my house, and we play similar games. And my my 9-year-old is starting to play games with my 16-year-old and my wife and myself, and she doesn't do as well because she's 9. And she's upset because although she does win sometimes, she doesn't win at the same rate. But I will say this, that she's comparing herself to her 16-year-old brother.
Mhm.
And I said, you may not think you're doing well, but I will say you played the game better at 9 than he did at 9.
Mhm.
Which that means at some point she's just going to kill us all.
Yeah, right, right.
You need to compare yourself at a couple time along your journey. That if you're going to benchmark yourself at all, that's the way to do it.
Mhm.
But even that is not the best comparison.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't compare yourself to people to the expert at the end of the role or you at the beginning of your role, and you shouldn't really compare yourself necessarily. Although benchmarking is important, trying to be realistic about where you are. I tell my kids, I tell my students, your job, the only person you should compare yourself to is you yesterday.
Mhm.
Because if you can do that, that's a competition that you can win the vast majority of times.
I like that.
And if you devote yourself to doing just that day in and day out, you're going to get a lot better and you'll never rest in your laurels
Mhm.
because even if you're the best, there's always someone nipping at your heels. If you keep that in mind, that's a recipe for a great life.
Yeah, it is. But our culture and popular media and everything tends to push us towards making these unfair comparisons. I'm really into reading literature a lot. You know, right now I'm reading a Saul Bellow novel, The Amazing Adventures of Augie March, or no, The Adventures of Augie March. And you know, it's like Dickensian, the descriptions are real thick. Uh, you know, it's just mind bending. It gets into the heads of the characters. And I write every morning and I write these little mini stories, or 1 page long. And when I first started that process, I would compare myself to people like, you know, Saul Bellow, one of the greatest American authors of all time. You know, he won a Nobel Prize. And I'm like, gosh, I wish I could get my characters to, you know, be as developed. I'm giving myself 1 page and I'm comparing myself to a novelist. And it's like, you know, I had to stop doing that and just enjoy the process. And then once I did that, it's like you know, the comparisons stopped. But you know, while I was preparing for our show today, I ran across an article by Wang and Lee in 2023, and the title of it is The Imposter Phenomenon Among Doctoral Students, a scoping review. And I believe this review covered 1978 to 2023. And 1978 was when the concept of imposter syndrome was developed, along with a scale that was developed to measure it or to evaluate it. And this article is in Frontiers in Psychology. And again, it's from 2023. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just break down the key points from it. Number one, they said there is a prevalence among doctoral students. It's a phenomenon that's widespread among doctoral students, with a significant percentage reporting moderate to severe symptoms of imposter syndrome, or they call it imposter phenomenon, across various disciplines. It has a huge impact on our mental health, and I can attest to this. It's strongly associated with mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and burnout. And these psychological challenges can exacerbate feelings of inadequacy and hinder academic performance. Um, in my case, when I finally identified what was happening, I realized that imposter syndrome was increasing my anxiety, and it led to a pretty profound bout of depression. You know, if we have any kind of, you know, we learn through psychology about self-sabotage, you know, because we have created a narrative through our childhood experiences. I'm not lovable. Let's say you feel like you're not lovable, or let's say you've had bad experiences in relationships or jobs, and they always come crashing down. Well, going forward, a lot of times we are everything's going great, and we can't believe, again, the imposter syndrome, we can't believe it's going great, so we subtly, subconsciously start trying to sabotage it to confirm our bias against ourselves. So it's deep stuff, and it can lead to some pretty scary mental health issues. The main contributing factors to imposter syndrome are inadequate academic preparation, and again, this is in the doctoral experience, but the contributors are inadequate academic preparation, a culture that glorifies genius, societal expectations, and family dynamics, as I mentioned before. Um, and those that are first generation PhD students, according to this article, are those facing high academic pressures, and they're particularly vulnerable to the imposter syndrome.
You know,
Go ahead.
what strikes me is just how, as you say, it's self-inflicted,
It
and
is.
and it's just to me, it's a poor realization of what we're trying to do here. Now, uh, indulge me for a minute here. Uh, a doctoral program is intended to do really simple things. It's trying to equip you with a lightweight and versatile set of tools to help you clarify your thinking, organize what you know about a subject, and devise a way to discover more about it. That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
Now, every course and every doctoral program may have a particular emphasis and explores content within that particular emphasis. Like at Bellevue, it's human capital. We explore scholarship pertaining to leadership and how to get more out of the firm's workforce. But the sense-making tools are generally shared across every scholarly domain, and those same tools are versatile and portable and can be brought to bear on practically everything. As long as the goal is to expand your understanding of the world. So I'll emphasize that again. It's a lightweight and versatile set of tools that can be brought to bear on a myriad of problems. If you just focus on that so totally simplifies what your task is as a scholar. So that is not hard to master.
Right.
It's a simple set of techniques. If you do that, it doesn't require a huge amount of academic knowledge. I mean,
Mhm.
you want to pick up on that stuff and incorporate that stuff and to employ those tools going forward. But as far as get the self-sabotage or the self-inflicted torture of not feeling academically ready, that is a fallacy because these tools they're not complicated.
Right.
And if we just maintain that perspective, things become a lot less stressful.
Right. Right. But in acquiring those tools, I can remember another instance where I took an organizational behavior course, and in that course, it's when we first encountered theoretical modeling and mediators and moderators. And the article we were asked to read was 80 pages long, and it was really dense. And I felt stupid. I felt really stupid. And I remember sitting on the floor of my living room and telling my wife, I said, I don't think I can do this. This is way over my head. And luckily, that wasn't the case. We started breaking it down in class. But there are those moments where you encounter, even though your point is correct, those tools and that you know, academic mind that has to develop where we are trying to find solutions and so on and move the field forward. There are some very complicated concepts that come with that can really make you question whether or not you're in the right place. Um, so it's and then add to it, let's be honest, we in higher education and graduate school, for better or for worse, we encounter people with big egos. We encounter people who uh, like to make us feel stupid, you know, or people who are threatened by what they see as your potential. And then that kind of unlocks a whole thing that it's not as easy as just shaking it off, you know. And as a graduate school, we tend to be sleep deprived and we're thinking all the time. And all of these variables go into reducing our, our ability to think clearly and to to keep our self-efficacy at a healthy level. We're being barraged by new information, dense information, personalities, peers who might just blow us away with their intelligence. But to your point, you just have to do you, right? And sometimes it's hard to do you when you're in this context.
And I found it's uh, the more we choose to simplify and clarify. That's what that's what sense making is.
Yeah.
Simplifying and clarifying. Because yes, there are people with big egos, there are people who are trying to baffle you with BS.
Hmm.
And but it's the simple, clarifying, crystallizing questions that all of a sudden make things. Have you considered this?
Hmm.
And sometimes that question, just if someone's trying to outsmart you or outwit you, a simple clarifying question makes obvious who's the one who knows what's going on in this, or at least who doesn't know what's going on in this conversation.
Right.
So I was trying to tell my students, I do not want you to write scholarly. I want you to write simply, clearly, and the more you do that, the easier you'll be understood, and the more it'll be clear in your mind what's happening here. And
Hmm.
you're right, because it's easy to get to our previous discussion upon complexity and things that are complicated. The more you can take a complicated set of ideas and unravel them and pull them apart so that you actually look at things one at a time, all of a sudden it's no longer a knot. It's now an unfurled set of threads that you can pull on and visualize and better understand here. So that's what I tell my students to do: simplify and clarify.
Yeah, good. Um, but back to let's assume for a minute that it is real, and for whatever reasons, a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome. And doctoral students with this imposter syndrome often attribute their success to external factors like luck, but at the same time internalize failures, you know, and then that perpetuates their feelings of inadequacy. And again, there's a lot of our, in our family history, our life journey, our life space, there's a lot of things that can cause us to feel this way. And I guess that's one of the, if we take a healthy approach to this and see it as something ultimately positive, something like imposter syndrome can help us dive a little deeper into ourselves, discover more about ourselves, and create a better sense of self, right? Because I think that's part of what imposter syndrome is. Our own ego gets in the way, maybe a little dose of narcissism, which can be situational, and not narcissism is a false sense of self. It doesn't, it can be pathological, but it's sometimes if we're in a new, like our first PhD class, wow, I'm a doctoral student. Look at me now. And then all of a sudden something hits you. It's like, wait a minute, that's not who I really am, or I don't feel that way, right? So, and it turns out, according to this article, that um, it was thought that imposter syndrome affected women a lot more than men, but that it turns out that it doesn't. It's equal, and culture and social contexts experience whether or not we have it, but it affects individuals across all genders, across all cultures as well.
Totally.
By the way, just for those who want to look into this further and maybe explore it as a doctoral topic or write an article on it, there are measurement tools the Clance imposter phenomenon scale. I think that's the one that was developed in 1978. And other tools like doctoral imposter syndrome scale are commonly used to assess it in doctoral students, but just in general. And they provide reliable ways to study and address the issue. Um, Imposter syndrome can have a significant impact on academic performance. It can lead to procrastination. Hello, that's like talking to me here. Procrastination, perfectionism, and avoidance behaviors. And this oftentimes causes students to underperform or disengage from academic responsibilities that ultimately reinforce our feelings of the imposter syndrome. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, which happens with a lot of folks who feel like they're in over their head. So, but I want to hit those again: procrastination, perfectionism, and avoidance behaviors. Those are really tangible effects of imposter syndrome. And as doctoral students, if you're feeling like you're procrastinating more than usual, or your perfectionism is getting in the way, and you're avoiding the hard work, or cleaning your bathroom instead of writing a paper, we start doing that kind of stuff, or vacuuming or cleaning our whole house even though we have a 30-page paper we're supposed to write. Perfectionism can cause that, and perfectionism actually can lead to procrastination and avoidant behavior. So keep
It's a
that.
form of it, I
It
would say.
is. It is. And it can get in the way of your professional growth. If you have imposter syndrome, it can lead to avoiding, or pursuing opportunities such as applying for competitive programs, seeking leadership roles, or networking because you don't feel that you're good enough. And it can definitely limit career advancement.
But talking about whenever you do something new,
Yeah.
let's say you want to go ahead and try out comedy. You can read
Yeah.
everything
Yes.
you want to do. You can read about all the books and how the timing and all. You can do all sorts of book work, but you're not going to actually really start learning until you get yourself in front of an open mic and
Yeah.
actually do it. Because
Absolutely.
and and we always have reluctance, and there's sure you need a minimum base of knowledge to try and do anything. But anytime you start talking to yourself and you start saying, well, I don't know enough yet.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know enough yet. You really need to start interrogating yourself. Is that really true?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
that is the excuse of imposter syndrome, this talking, whispering in your ear.
Yeah.
So if you're spending a good amount of time, 20 hours a week researching and learning and growing, and if you do that over a period of a couple of months, every time you keep, oh, I don't know enough yet. Well, at that point, you still got to start looking at yourself and say, is this something else?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
chances are, once you have a certain critical mass of stuff, and that's not a lot, you
Yeah.
have enough to do something with it. The the only thing that's holding you back is your own fear of not doing well with it.
Right. And a lot of times that fear can be, uh, the antecedent to that fear can be imposter syndrome sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, some strategies to recognize and address and then prevent it: recognize it. First of all, you got to reflect on your self-talk, like you were just saying, Nick, and acknowledge patterns of self-doubt or perfectionism. You got to seek feedback from trusted mentors who can say, no, you're thinking about this all wrong, or it's not what I see. There's nothing like a good friend to prop you up and say, I think you're awesome, whatever. Um, and then, people that can help you realize that you have instances where your self-perception may not align with reality. And Nick, I mean, I'm getting personal here, but I walk around most of the time when people ask me to step into a leadership role, or they say something very complimentary about me. or imagine me in a role that I'm not in or that I've never seen myself in. I'm like my doctor friend. It's like I want to look over my shoulder and say, who are you talking to? You know? And so I struggle with this a lot. So this is why it's a really but when that when people do finally give you that feedback and say things like, give yourself a little bit more credit, or you're not seeing yourself the way that your peers are, that can help you with perspective taking and kind of ground you and get you out of your head, right? And again,
Mhm.
the academic journey, we are in our heads a lot. And so while we're there, we can trigger these things like imposter syndrome.
And you're talking about what's happening in the in any endeavor in the academy or whatnot. There's a contrast, a very stark difference between confidence and arrogance.
Truly.
And it's about the ego thing you were talking about a little while ago too.
Yeah.
Uh, when I talk to my students, I I do not want to be Professor Kingsfield from
Yeah.
a paper chase. I want to lower the power distance.
Yes.
So although many students still want to call me Dr. Wolf, I invite them to call me Nick or Dr. Nick or whatever, because I want to
Yeah.
lower the power distance. I do not want to. I don't need the title. I don't want that, because I want to make it easier for my students to engage with me, and so that it reduces the chance for generating their own imposter syndrome. It's been my, if people want to be referred to by their title of doctor, they earned it. They have the right to demand it. However, I do not find that impressive.
Yeah.
It may signal that you're centering your ego rather than doing what you're doing. Not always the case. That's a maybe a red flag for me to look at. Titles
Yeah.
only carry weight in the minds of people who believe in titles.
True.
Uh, and in some ways, I kind of consider them the water wings of legitimacy.
Or
Confident
the
people,
training wheels. Yeah.
confident people don't have to care about title. They
Yeah.
wear their legitimacy in their hearts and in their minds, not on the nameplate on the door. You
Truly.
know, uh, that's why I don't care about I don't need to be arrogant. I can be confident. That's what I aspire to be. But we all struggle with are we right here? But there's benefits of being confident, or at least embracing this idea here. And if people are struggling with this as a budding scholar, I think we should all kind of return to why we're doing what we're doing. Now, people become scholars for a variety of reasons. Many of them are practical. Some want to solve problems or pursue activism. They're seeking a promotion. They want to have more gravitas in debate and conversation. And some just want to pursue a difficult task, like climbing Mount Everest. It's a similar thing there. Those are very practical ideas. But I have found the best students are the ones that always mix in an element of the metaphysical. They pursue truth because it's valuable in its own right.
Mhm.
You're just trying to learn how to figure things out and to pass on what we've learned. Curiosity is the virtue, knowledge is the quest, and wisdom is the destination. If you approach your scholarship from that, you're going to be endlessly curious and not have any pressure on yourself, or at least a much lower pressure on yourself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's the people who are engaged in pursuing truth. They don't need to tether themselves to ego. And if you do that, oh my goodness, it is so freeing, because
Mhm.
you don't need to constantly demonstrate your ideas are better. You don't have to win debates. You can win, or you can admit when somebody else has a better approach or a better idea or better insight, and celebrate it when they do that.
Right,
And
right.
you'll be more open to new ideas, new approaches, and collaboration will be so much easier because people will actually enjoy working with you.
Mhm, mhm.
And all that happens, it's all combined with lower levels of stress, lower levels of anxiety, and you'll be in a much better mood.
Right,
That's
right.
that's what confidence is.
Yeah,
The more you get away from that, that's where the arrogance piece comes into.
yeah,
And I would just encourage all of you, if you are struggling with imposter syndrome, just say, we're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to know more.
right.
That's the approach that I like.
Yeah. And that's one of the strategies is addressing it and being able to reframe our negative thoughts about ourselves. Like, one thought might be, I don't belong here. Uh, but then, switching that up and saying, hey, I earned my place here. I, you know, did what it took to be here. And I bring these, unique strengths to the table. That's that confidence part that you talked about. And then celebrate your achievements, no matter how small, to build confidence and combat feelings of inadequacy. But I agree with you too, taking it to that higher mind. But again, I agree with everything you said, but I don't think anybody will disagree with the notion that the academic journey itself, it's stressful. You do have to prove yourself, at different times. And sometimes that, I remember in my journey where it's like, how many more 30-page papers do I have to write to prove that I know what I'm talking about? Which makes you start questioning, do I even know what the hell I'm talking about? So it can be, and again, this searching for the truth or pursuing the truth, sometimes we turn that lens on ourselves and try to figure out the truth about ourselves, which sometimes can lead us into these darker paths. And I mean, if we're being intellectually honest with ourselves, sometimes, that pursuit of honesty and truth can reveal some insecurities and very serious doubts.
True. Uh, the scientific method is nothing but critique. So, and self critique is healthy
It is, to a
to
point.
a point.
Yeah.
Uh,
But it can become masochistic. It can almost become narcissistic, where it's like, what's this focus on myself so much? And back to your point about people who, are really impressed with titles and want to make sure their title is always up front. You know, I ask doctoral students who are struggling a lot of times, you know, why are you doing this? And if the answer is anything other than because I want to advance knowledge in my field, I want to contribute to my field, I want to help solve problems in my field. If the answer is anything other than that, I start to wonder if they're on the right path. If the answer is I've always wanted to see those three letters behind my name, I've always really gotten a charge out of the idea that people are going to call me doctor. Those are red flags to me. They really are. And I think, in fact, I often think that our, you know, application process should be one question, why are you doing this? What are your goals? And if if it comes across as highly personal, and again, sometimes people want to be the first in their family, things like that. I mean, there's a fine line here, but if there's a really big dose of narcissism, I think that's a red flag. And too much focus
yeah,
on status is a red flag.
yeah, I agree with all of that, and that's and to me, those that same idea is predictive of staying power. Because if people are, I want to be do this doctorate because I want a promotion, or I want to get a pay raise, or I want to have the letters. Those folks have a hard time sticking around
They do.
because unless you have a true love of trying to learn, understand, and apply these tools, and are doing it for generally uh, socially positive reasons, you're not going to be able to fill the gas tank on a regular
Yeah,
basis. And
that's a
you're
really good way to put it. Yeah.
and if you don't have this is a marathon. You have to be willing to hurt a little bit over a long period of time to get through this journey.
Yeah.
And I say if and I've noticed this because I do help. Um, I do see some of the applicants to our programs, and I look at their interest statement, and they're saying it and going, I have a hard time thinking this person's going to finish because
Yeah.
they're just they're not their mind frame is in the right place in order for them to um, keep committed to the goal.
And
In
they
my case,
keep renewing their interest or practice
and the
renewal.
motivation, it's all motivation.
Yeah. So one of the things this article points out too is ways to prevent imposter syndrome from holding you back. They recommend to build a support system of mentors, colleagues, or friends who provide encouragement and constructive feedback. You have to practice self-compassion by recognizing that no one is perfect. And again, you mentioned we've talked about culture. You just mentioned our country and what it takes in this country to get ahead. But we cannot deny that the American culture is an individualistic culture, first and foremost. And that leads to a lot of notions of perfectionism and trying to stand out and, personal achievements. So that, there's some cultural elements here too. We have to realize that no one's perfect, and even experts have areas of improvement that they can work on. We have to set realistic goals and boundaries to prevent overwork and burnout, because sometimes if we're suffering from imposter syndrome, we're in a hole and we just keep digging. We work harder. We keep trying harder and harder to prove to ourselves. We end up overworking ourselves. The next thing you know, you're burned out, and then that's a bad place to be. And if it's something where you have a recurring dream, back to my opening story, if there are signs that this is becoming more than just a fleeting doubt, but it's starting to take root and you're having recurring dreams, you're having relationship problems, you find that you're agitated or angry all the time or things like that, we're finally to a point in this culture where it's okay to seek help. For so many decades that was taboo. It was some kind of sign of weakness, but not anymore. Clinical counseling programs in universities are jam packed. I find it very interesting at our own university. The MBA used to be, you know, the premier uh, program with the highest enrollment, and that's been completely overshadowed by our clinical mental health counseling programs. Social work programs are huge. Universities definitely see them as a moneymaker, but it's a kind of a win-win, because yeah, there's a lot of revenue to be had, but society benefits, from having clinical counselors and trained mental health experts. And the demand is so high for this. In fact, I was just in a meeting yesterday asking, when are we going to top out on enrollment? When are we going to flood the market? And I asked a psychologist this, and he said it's impossible. We'll never flood the market. He said we're way behind the curve on helping people in our country deal. Our suicide rates are through the roof. We have, I mean, there's antidepressants are being advertised constantly on television. I mean, it's no secret that we have a mental health crisis in this country. And imposter syndrome is one of the things that can lead to, clinical depression and things that are going to require you to get some professional help. And we should never be afraid to do that. Um,
Yeah.
but having said that, it's funny because when I started my journey with imposter syndrome, that dream that I had, I thought, oh, good, now it's over. I've gotten it out of the way. I've had my moment with imposter syndrome. Little did I know that was just a taste of it. So, And then there are some people, and I'm not going to drop a name, but I have one of my dearest friends who I've known since 1978, who actually won an Academy Award for co-writing a screenplay a few years ago. I could not be more proud of this guy. And he's just such a dear friend. He comes from very humble roots. And after he won the Academy Award, I called him. We had this tearful conversation, because we've been friends for so long. I was so proud of him. And I said, I said, one thing I want to let you know about is imposter syndrome. Well, he took it the wrong way. He thought I was suggesting that he was an imposter. In this beautiful moment, he got kind of, I said, no, 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 let me back out. Let me explain. And so, I mean, he was still flying high, from the wind. And I'm saying, hey, be careful, this is going to turn dark on you real fast. Well, but then several months later, he goes, oh my gosh, I had a dream that my Academy Award, I had to pack it up and send it back. So it can happen to the best of us.
Yeah, it's talking about the how often we pathologize our mental health, or at least we only start seeking out help when we have problems.
Yes.
But we should be proactive about putting in our own communities, and that's why
Yes.
I always talked about to my students here. Your cohort members are an ad hoc impromptu support group to help
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So get together.
And they can relate. They can relate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're on the same journey, and you're all in the foxhole together. So
Yeah.
I tell them, if you haven't already done so, you should be forming social media groups and meeting regularly, checking in with one each other, because everybody is going to have moments of doubt, and they have moments that they're overwhelmed. And it's that point you can lean upon each other and help everybody get through those sticking points, those hard points there. So the cohort model is extremely useful, and if you're not doing that, I think you're missing a real opportunity to help boost your chance of success.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I would just add that, when we go outside of our cohort and try to explain this to people who do not understand our journey or how it works, you know, not of any fault of their own, but it can actually add to our doubts. Like, gosh, they don't even understand what I'm talking about. But well, how could they? They're not in the, and sometimes that's where humility can get us in trouble. I mean, I have a habit of just assuming that everybody knows what I'm talking about. And when they don't, a lot of times I think, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm not explaining it well enough, or I always turn it back on myself instead of saying, well, they don't know because they've never been exposed to it, or you know, I just assume that, and that can be, and we see this in organizations and professions where we'll talk to somebody in a profession or in a position of leadership. And I've noticed this a lot where they just tend to jump in, no context. They just assume you know what they're talking about, that you have the same privileged view of a situation or dynamics that they do, and you don't. And so it's another way, just, make sure you're always working on that perspective taking and trying your best to have a real true sense of self.
I guess I will like to finish up with another pull from a TV show here. I remember one time I was back in the '90s. So I was a big fan of The West Wing,
Mm,
and I remember watching a documentary that was being run alongside it, and they're saying that included interviews with people who were working in Congress in the White House, and I heard one person's intellectual journey during their time in Washington. She said it actually proceeds in three stages. At first, you walk in the door and you feel overwhelmed with the history and majesty of the place. Things are hitting you so rapidly, and you're just trying to keep your head above water. And that's very much the imposter syndrome we've been discussing here.
yeah.
The second stage is you now have had some experience under your belt. You're starting to perform rather well, and you're really starting to feel good about yourself. you started to believe that you can actually perform at this level. And then a third stage is you finally realize the stakes about what is going on, and you look around and you see the mistakes we make and the imperfections of the people who operate in this world. And you have a bit of existential dread because you
Yeah.
realize that it's only us that stands between us and the abyss.
Yeah.
And that's funny, but it's life because imposter syndrome is common and understandable. And we all start off unsure that maybe we're inadequate to the task, but we all are. If we stick it out, we will discover that. And ultimately, it's only us that keeps the world from falling apart. You know,
Mhm.
we often have heard the expression "fake it till you make it." The sooner we realize that that whole expression is poorly conceived, the better. Because doing it, even if you're doing it poorly or inartfully to start off, it's not faking. That's still doing it. It's the
Mhm.
first step to becoming it.
Right. I agree. I agree 100%. But I really hope this conversation helps open a dialogue for people who are suffering from it. And even if you're lucky enough not to suffer from imposter syndrome, maybe you can recognize it in other people and be there to aid them and help them get over it, because it can lead to some very debilitating uh, behaviors and habits. But if you're willing to admit it, work with people, build those friendships, the cohort model, like you said, um, the good news is it is pretty easy to overcome once you have the right tools and practices in place. But don't let it get in your way. You have to keep moving. And like you said, and all of us should remember that as scholars, it's the field that matters that we're studying and that we're trying to move forward. And if we can keep that sort of transcendent ideal or goal in mind, I think we have a better chance of avoiding some of the pitfalls that come with our profession and our journey.
Totally agree. Well, Stephen, this has been a fun and interesting conversation, and I appreciate you having it with me today. And I would thank all you folks out there for listening. And until next time, this is Dr. Nick Wolf
And Dr. Stephen Lenneberger,
reminding you to
to
think
think
better.
better.